Well, good evening and welcome to the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan's 2021 three-week Community Resilience Series, presented in collaboration with Kent District Library. I'm Michael Van Den, and I'm the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan. And on behalf of my colleague, Erica Kubik, and the Board of Directors of the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan, I welcome all of you. Thank you for adjusting with us as we program responsibly during this time of COVID-19. We hope that you will stay safe and show grace to those in your community. The Council's mission is to empower the people and organizations of West Michigan to engage thoughtfully with the world. We do this with the help of 50 local companies, 11 educational partners, and many community members. Together, we seek to provide programming that is credible, objective, relevant, civil, and compelling. To change the world, we believe, one must first know the world. And you can learn more about what we do at worldmichigan.org. Tonight, we say a special thank you to our friends at Kent District Library, who annually partner with us to provide this free resource to the West Michigan community. And with us tonight is KDL's Director of Engagement, Randy Goebel. Share a few words from KDL. Randy, welcome.
Good evening. I'm Randy Goebel, Director of Engagement with Kent District Library. And for several years now, it's been an awesome pleasure to be partnering with the World Affairs Council, and particularly this series on community resilience. I think all of the adjectives have been used to describe the past year. I mean, literally all of them. These times are certainly a test of our agility and our resilience, which is why this topic of the series is so timely. There's a book titled The Great Good Place by Ray Oldenburg, where he talks about places and what their role is in society and the importance of it. And the first place is actually your home. The first place is what you consider to be the most important place where you feel that you belong. The second place is your work or your school. Then the third place, these are anchors of the community. These are places that foster broader, more creative interaction. Your third place is where you encounter familiar faces, make new acquaintances. Examples of third places are churches, cafes, clubs, and public libraries. So since March of last year, we've essentially lost the second and third places to a large extent. But now, even still now, many people are still working and going to school at home. But thankfully, the library is open. The use of digital resources have skyrocketed, and mobile Wi-Fi hotspots have been checked out to help students and people who need to work from home. We're partnering with Feeding America to provide literacy support for students and families, particularly people who have food security issues. In the past year, we've produced more than 2,000 online programs for all ages, ranging from story times to book discussions and features on timely topics like this one tonight. We're now also planning for the summer. We're partnering with the Kent County Parks and other organizations to bring the library, your third place, to you and in more special ways. The libraries are open now, so please stop by. We're looking forward to seeing you at Kent District Library. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Randy, very much. And again, thanks to KDL for being a terrific partner in this spring series that we do each year. After John Austin's presentation this evening, there will be ample time for questions. You may type them into the YouTube comments section, or you may text them to 616-308-6560. And please exhibit civility to our guests and hospitality to others by asking questions that are respectful and succinct. We're pleased to have John Austin with us, and we are grateful to him for his flexibility to engage us in this format. John Austin is the former president of the Michigan Board of Education. He directs the Michigan Economic Center, a center for ideas and network building to advance Michigan's economic transformation. He also serves as a non-resident senior fellow with the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and the Upjohn Institute, where he leads these organizations' efforts to support economic transformation in the American Midwest. Mr. Austin also lectures on the economy at the University of Michigan. In 2020, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs released Mr. Austin's report, A Global Midwest, The Path to New Prosperity. And that provides an updated analysis of the Great Lakes Midwest economy from the Brookings 2006 publication, The Vital Center, also authored by Mr. Austin. The report provides a refreshed blueprint for spreading economic growth and opportunity in more people and places in this important swing state region. At the Michigan Economics Center, Mr. Austin has spurred work to transform Michigan's economy and make the state a leader in the coming green and blue sustainable economy of the future. He received his master's in public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and a bachelor's from Swarthmore College in economics and political science. His presentation tonight is titled Toward a Newly Vital Midwest. Would you please join me in welcoming John Austin?
Thank you, Michael. An overly generous introduction, and thanks, Randy, for sponsoring this series. It's actually good to be back with the World Affairs Council of West Michigan. I'm pretty sure I spoke with your group 15 years ago or so when we were sharing and rolling out that Brookings report you alluded to, which was really the first analysis of this highly interdependent and highly unique storyline about the Midwest Great Lakes economy and how we grew and how we could further evolve to help more people find economic purchase in a changed world. Much has changed since then, and certainly, West Michigan, you've shown in many ways a path for how to kind of evolve and diversify your economy and find a place where more people can find security. And that's the story I want to tell tonight about with this updated report. How do we understand where we are in the Midwest and our communities today? How do we continue to accelerate vital and resilient and inclusive community growth in communities that are very similar in the upper Midwest, the industrial and agricultural heartland? I'll talk a bit about how that picture has changed a bit since the COVID pandemic reshaped all our lives, and including, we now do these things. We once met in person, and I spoke to you, I think, where I could see the audience, and now we're doing these crazy things. So a lot has changed. And also, I'm going to touch on some of the more recent work. There are similar older industrial regions around the world, in our Western democracy allies, that are also facing a similar kind of economic and political dynamic, where those communities that is still in relative decline, that's where folks are anxious and angry, and they're kind of easily fanned to with promises of bringing back the past and blaming immigrants, and the kind of polarizing politics that we've suffered from a bit here is exacerbated if we don't help more people find a place in that economy. I just got my second Pfizer dose, made in Kalamazoo, Michigan yesterday. So I'm feeling a little bit of that truck hitting you feeling. So if I'm less high energy than I usually am, you'll understand. And if I, for some reason, fall over backwards, I'm at 806 West Liberty in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So someone send, the 911 calls. But let me lift up a little PowerPoint here if we can do it, and I'll talk you through some pictures and tell bit of the story of the region and who we are and how we evolved and where we might be going from here. As indicated, we just prior to the pandemic, we had just finished this updated report of Vital Midwest for the Chicago Council, and we're beginning to share this story about our economy and where we are today, which, as I said, has evolved quite a bit over the last 20 years. Story of our region is really one of, an amazing set of natural assets that with the richest farmland on earth, timbers, ores, tremendous bounty. When it began to be settled in the late 1700s, when we got control of this region, it was the frontier. When we really began to settle this region was after, in particular Michigan, like 1830, when the Erie Canal was built. It all of a sudden flooded Michigan with people to farm the land and to take advantage of this bounty and make a living and a home here. A lot of them were Northern Europeans, the Dutch and the Germans and others that settled Michigan. and other places like it. Our population, Michigan, exploded in one decade in 1830 to 47 times, and multiplied 7 times over when people moved in here, began to harvest the bounty, raise the crops, ship our goods to the world. Then we began to convert these amazing bounty and build really the great signature industries that powered America's rise. Certainly the steel industry, the oil and gas industry in Northeast Ohio and Pennsylvania, the aviation industry, the car industry, of course, which we created. Grand Rapids became a furniture making capital of the world. Cincinnati was where they chopped up pigs. They started making soap, and all of a sudden you have global consumer product giants like Procter and Gamble that grow there. Chicago, Sears, and invented the retail catalog and sales industry. And it wasn't just in the broader Midwest. Think of just West Michigan, where you all are. Upjohn invented the pill that you could swallow in Kalamazoo. The Uptons invented and mechanized appliances, and Whirlpool was born. In Battle Creek, we invented the cereal industry. So these were the great industries that powered America, created great wealth, great jobs for several decades or more. But in recent decades, this region really is in transition. This industrial cockpit is evolving as those industries, some of them disappeared, many of them restructured. It doesn't take 4,000 people to run an auto factory. It's 400, and they're programming computers. We've been moving from this industrial powerhouse to a tech belt. It's an imperfect and spotty evolution. Some parts of the Midwest are now thriving anew in a changed global knowledge tech-driven economy. Other parts, other communities languish and have lost their anchors and haven't replaced them. My work and our, I think, collective work is how do we accelerate economic transition in the region, and how do we help it reach more people and places, in part so that we can tamp down the responsiveness to this very damaging right-wing populism that, if anything, is undermining our democracies here and in other countries in Europe. And I'll come back to that at the end to illustrate that phenomenon. But this region has really is two Midwest these days, even evolved from 20 years ago when we first painted this picture. Pittsburgh, the Steel City, is not the Steel City anymore. Its economy collapsed, people left, and now it's this sparkling, spanking, growing again, AI, robotic, healthcare, tech-driven on the backs of innovations spilling out of Carnegie Mellon and University of Pittsburgh. And its beautiful river location. Ann Arbor, that's the Google headquarters in Ann Arbor. All our university towns, of which we're blessed with many university and college towns, are kicking it in a changed knowledge economy. They're talent magnets. They're the incubation center for whole new industries and technologies. Google, of course, has to be in Ann Arbor because talent wants to live in Ann Arbor, where I am. Now, there's also just as many Janeville, Wisconsin, which is the one picture where it lost their big GM plants and hasn't found their way back. That other picture, the lower right, is Sharon, Pennsylvania. Sharon is one of the Youngstown and that whole valley were steel towns that have just been hollowed out and wiped out. There's these two Midwests, not all abandoned factory towns and dusty small cities. It's tech magnets and innovation centers that are growing and thriving, from Minneapolis in the west to Pittsburgh in the east. We started with a kind of shared economic trajectory. A lot of small and medium-sized and large manufacturing and food processing communities sprinkled, from Iowa and Minnesota east to Pittsburgh and Western New York. Buffalo and Rochester are just like us, big industrial employer towns and transshipment centers. Many of them lost a lot of jobs, a lot of people, state infrastructure, earned us this Rust Belt moniker, but that's really 25 years old. We still have, because of what we did here, amazing economic assets that matter powerfully in today's economy, just as they did in yesterday's economy. We've got almost 150 of the Fortune 500 companies are headquartered here that play in the world and are globally engaged. Huge GDP comes out of this region. If this region was its own country, we'd be the fourth largest GDP on earth. This is probably our greatest advantage in an economy where new innovations, new technologies, new businesses, new jobs all grow out of the interplay of research universities and the private sector and capital that takes advantage of both the talent and puts new technologies to work to create whole new businesses. We have 20 of the top, we have 20 universities big that are ranked in the top 200 globally. That produce a disproportionate share of the nation's innovation, talent in all disciplines, win R&D from the feds at higher levels. No place on earth has this network of higher education institutions and research universities that are world-class, that are at scale. This is how Silicon Valley and Boston happened. And we've got more in this region than the West Coast or the East Coast. One of the huge economic engines and assets that matters profoundly in a changed economy where emerging sectors like IT and health and medical bio and clean energy and smart water solutions are the future. These are just the medical schools, which, as you know well, in West Michigan, where you built purposefully a medical mile and grew your footprint of kind of your medical industrial complex. That growth is hinged off research institutions and teaching hospitals, of which we have more than the most in our region. And we kick out, as I said, a disproportionate share of MBA, STEM degree holders, bachelor's degrees, because our institutions are bigger, and we have 2,500 other colleges and universities sprinkled around the landscape that are anchors and engines for the smaller and medium-sized communities. Think of what you purposely built one in West Michigan 30 years ago, Grand Valley State University, and look what good that has been, particularly as you move some of those pieces into the downtown to help with your anchor institutions and the revitalization of downtown. So as I said, where we led the action in the 20th century economy, all the great industries, these are the emerging sectors where there's giant job and business growth, huge global markets to exploit. We have the horsepower, both in Michigan and the innovation infrastructure, to be a leader in all of these arenas. Think of what's happened too with COVID. We turned our competencies in discovery and making and manufacturing at scale, not just the vaccines, which centers attention on Kalamazoo, but Stryker in Kalamazoo began kicking out hospital beds. Our big three, I guess it's 2.5 now. I don't know what the half one is called anymore. They converted with their supply chain in the Midwest to make all the PPE at scale. 100,000 million, masks and ventilators were all of a sudden being made by our great industries in this region. We also have amazing natural assets. It's a beautiful part of the world. Farmland, parks, outdoors. In Michigan alone, we've got 3,400 miles of Great Lakes coastline, and everybody wants to live and work near the coast. Again, you in West Michigan have been building that out. You cleaned up the river and connected to it in downtown Grand Rapids. Now you're putting the rapids back in. It makes for a nice lifestyle. You've got that West Michigan coastline, which is, Lake Michigan is so spectacular that, Muskegon and other communities along West Michigan coast and Holland I was just at are, they're beautiful and they're nice places to visit. But more importantly, now professionals can live and work anywhere and do their thing. And they're going to do it from places like, Holland and Grand Haven on the West Michigan coast. We've got unique problems and legacies of our industrial economy that we created and ruled. Really ruled the Midwest, ruled our nation's economy and powered it for several generations. One is, as you know, for years you could move here from Appalachia, where I grew up. You didn't need an education. You could get a good job at the plant or the machine shop. So we have still a legacy of particularly adults who are out in the workforce who didn't get more than a high school diploma. So our overall population is still relatively uneducated in an era when you have to have a post-secondary degree or credential or certificate of some kind, and the technical training, as I say, to program the robot, which there are jobs to be doing, but you're not going to have a low skill job, sticking a bumper on anymore. And we have also more people who worked in those kind of routinized industries like manufacturing, and where the pace of automation and robots replacing humans for the routinized jobs is accelerating. We have this big, massive innovation, new technology development, IP, intellectual property, talent generation in the region, but we still don't attract much of the nation's venture capital dollars, is what this shows. The value of venture deals done in California is 50% of the US total, Boston 10%, New York only, despite having a quarter to a third of the nation's new technologies and talent created here, we only attract 4.3 of the US total investment. And if anything, our wealth, which we have amazing wealth, think of the family fortunes in your area, think of the foundations, think of our universities and their endowments, think of the pension funds, which we created in the first pension funds were created in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and Michigan, which have great wealth. We're subsidizing innovation investments on the coast. We need to invest more of this through our own Midwest vehicles of early stage capital and venture capital. We also, as we all know, we have some of the oldest and most battered and beat up infrastructures, whether it's water, sewer, or as we know very famously in Michigan, our roads that need repair. And now we need to expend, we have too many people in Michigan and the Midwest who aren't reached by broadband and high-speed internet, which, as you know, is essential in today's world. We also have more governmental units. We organize the Midwest by townships. That means we've got thousands and thousands of governmental units. Some of them have lost their tax base as folks moved out of a Flint, as the extreme example. Can't afford to do anything. They have no tax base left. It's hard to do kind of metropolitan-wide economic development, transportation solutions, infrastructure. You've done a better job in West Michigan of working together across governmental units. We also, and this is one of our biggest challenges, the industrial cities of the North are the most Black-white segregated in the country. 15 of the top 25 most segregated cities are us. And as you know, this informs all our politics and makes it so hard to come together and work together around common solutions, whether it's from education to economic development to job training. We also, as I indicate, we have more workers who are exposed in kind of soon to be automated out of existence occupations than other parts of the US. Now, we have a lot of success stories. As I said, a lot of communities have turned this economic corner. They've moved from what they used to do to doing something different that is growing and emerging in today's economy. Most all of the major metros, I mean, Minneapolis, St. Paul used to be the flour milling capital of the world, and now it's no longer that. It's a diverse finance, tech, quality of life, health, hothouse. Pittsburgh, all the way to the east, has evolved. Indianapolis, Chicagoland, Detroit and Cleveland are further behind, but they're moving forward. They had the biggest exodus of people and money and the sharpest racial divides of any of us. All of our college and university towns, as I said, are just killing it. They're hovering out into the global economy and are wonderfully exciting and attractive places to live and work. From Iowa City and University of Iowa all the way to State College are thriving communities. And we have a lot of small and medium-sized manufacturing communities, and these are the most interesting, that don't have a big research university, that kind of ran a plan, as you did in Grand Rapids, to grow and diversify and become a leader in today's economy. Kalamazoo next door, is a great example. It's, it lost 40,000 Upjohn folks when they imploded and Pfizer bought it. But they developed, they kept some of that talent to start biotech firms. They redeveloped their downtown for livable, walkable, and you can get a Bell's Brewery was financed in part by county money. And then, of course, the Kalamazoo Promise guaranteed a higher education, went to the Kalamazoo school districts, and it reversed the exodus of middle-class families, and people are moving back into Kalamazoo, and it's a thriving community again. And that's a pretty impressive achievement. We made recommendations in the Vital Midwest about what we could do as a nation to accelerate this, everything from place focused on distressed communities, economic development efforts, to growing our university innovation hubs with the private sector, to paying for a post-secondary credential for laid off workers and adult workers who just have a high school diploma, which we would really benefit from. But I won't belabor those. Now some of this picture has evolved a little bit. There were forces already at work that are been accelerated by COVID. There's new innovations and new products and technologies. They're training up a robot delivery vehicle right outside my door here, or on the street in Ann Arbor, with someone following behind a scooter. The AI that the satellite is talking to it is teaching it how to drive itself around town and deliver your pizza or your Amazon package or your COVID test or shot. And these are the kinds of new things that are happening. We're automating and digitizing everything. So more work in those arenas. Opportunity for the Midwest and Michigan, as talent is fleeing San Francisco and the coast. They've learned that they don't have to be there, and they want to work from quality of life and lifestyle communities, of which we have a lot. So that's an opportunity for us. We're paying more attention to the needs of a younger and changing demographic profile. We're also a climate positive region, meaning, relatively speaking, climate change is not going to whack us with the tremendous floods and fires and disruptions that it does on other areas. And we have tons of fresh water, which is the only resource that human beings, must have to live, and that we can use and reuse smartly in making things. And so we're a long-term sustainable platform for economic growth and development. We're seeing, though, again, more attention to the COVID pandemic, and its automation makes it even more urgent that we retrain and upskill people who have lost their job in the COVID reshaped economy, so that they can be one of the coders to train that robot, so that they can be one of the broadband extenders, that as we're going to put people to work, as they're going to go to work with clean, sustainable, smart systems that hopefully we'll be installing in all of our offices and firms and businesses. So more need for retraining accelerated by COVID. And another one I want to touch on is the COVID really illustrated how our employment security system, which we created in the region, was in tatters, meaning the whole unemployment insurance system was invented in the Midwest and Wisconsin that paid you something when you were laid off from your cyclical job until it came back. The whole bargain that was struck after World War II, where big employers and their unions said, we'll pay for health care, we'll pay for pensions, that's been unraveling for some time. And we need to remake our whole employment security system that we created for the nation in this region. So we have portable pensions that encourage mobility, so that we have healthcare that is guaranteed, so that we have an unemployment and reemployment system that retrains you, doesn't pay you for a job that isn't coming back. So these are things that we uniquely have to do. I'm going to turn this thing off if I can figure out how to do it, and go back and talk to you guys. I'll stop sharing my screen. Because in the couple minutes I have left, I just want to touch on this phenomenon about regions that are like us in the UK, in Germany, in France. Exactly the same dynamics that saw the communities where, for example, Trump gets his support most fiercely, including folks who are moved to go attack the Capitol, is in the older industrial communities that are still in decline. They went even Trumpier for Trump in 2020, even though Biden won the state overall, in the Monroes and the Battle Creeks and the areas around Saginaw and Bay City that haven't found a turn, where folks don't have optimism as they do in Kalamazoo. And I would warrant in West Michigan, there's a little more optimism about the future. We can make it. We're going to have a chance to have a decent job. Same thing explains Brexit vote, and the folks that voted to leave the European Union and elected Boris Johnson are in the Midlands and the North that are still struggling old mill towns that are hollowed out. In Germany, the AfD party, which is the right-wing populist in 2017, got strong support in East Germany, the places that hadn't been pulled forward into a new economy, and places in what they call their Ruhr, or their Ruhrgebiet, like their old coal and steel. It's their industrial heartland in the West. And the towns that relied on coal and steel, which have been phased out completely and are hollowed out, that's where you see the largest voting for their right-wing nationalist candidate. Marine Le Pen and the Yellow Vest movement first in France, which started when sort of rural and hinterland and formerly working class communities were angry about a gas tax, and they started marching in the streets and protesting the urban elites who didn't understand, what they were experiencing out in the hinterlands. And Marine Le Pen, who's running for election again, was defeated by Emmanuel Macron in 2017, but she won all of the districts that are like their older industrial communities that have the highest levels of unemployment up in their northern regions, where they're just like many of our communities, where big manufacturing employers are gone, and folks are anxious and alienated and worried about their future, and understandably wondering and not liking the fact their communities aren't what they used to be. And when I wanted to share a small difference, when in Europe, where they studied what's up with this populism, they have lots of academics and rich studies, but they discriminate between left-wing populism and populists and right-wing populism. And I think so Bernie Sanders would be a good example of a left-wing populist here. He speaks to the same conditions and anxieties, but he offers a different recipe. Yes, you're getting screwed, excuse my French, but we're going to soak the rich, and we're going to pay for you to have free healthcare and free college for your kids and decent, minimum wage. Whereas the right-wing populists like Le Pen and Boris Johnson and Trump, they offer a cultural solution. They say, bring back the past, but also I'll bring back the past and it's immigrants and other people of color that are somehow getting theirs at your expense. And so they offer this, what I feel is not the right answer to the understandable anxieties of people who are anxious about their place and status in a world of change, by blaming other forces and other people of color for their condition, and not doing anything constructive to rebuild jobs in the economy. So in my view, and this work we're doing now internationally, is if we don't sort of speak to, reach, and communicate and really do something constructive to improve the lives of folks in these in decline regions, they're going to keep responding to that kind of nostalgia, nativism, and would retreat from the world order, hole up in our countries, pull back from the international community, which is the exact opposite, I think, of what both your organization and many of us believe is a healthier and more productive way to move our societies and our economy forward. So I'll end by saying, we, I think, and I hope, need to work together to understand each other even more across boundaries within our society and across the oceans of the world. Remember that the Marshall Plan after World War II was where we offered amazing financial support to rebuild our enemy, Germany, and all of Europe. And we did it to avoid kind of political chaos and communism and the kind of destructive political chaos that we are seeing all too much of, both in our own country and in some of our allies in Europe. So appreciate the chance to be with you tonight, and look forward to your own short speeches, presentations, or questions about these topics.
John, thank you very much. Very informative and provocative, interesting. I think all of us can relate, whatever town in Michigan we live in, to some of the things you talked about. Appreciate it very much. And we are getting some questions in. Let me remind viewers that you can text them in the YouTube comments section, or you can send them to 616-308-6560. And John, to lead off, a question. It sounds like there's no one size fits all approach to creating prosperity in our Midwestern cities, but are there some first critical steps? Are there some initial things that you've seen in your research that the successful cities have done to get them on the road to turn that corner and to become vital?
Yeah, and there it's sort of understanding too the way the economy has changed and what is most important to either leverage or to create and build on as you seek to find competitive advantage and create new businesses and jobs that pay, which is the main goal. So for example, just appreciating everybody's got to have a higher education, a post-secondary education, focusing on that wherever you are. You've got to create a place, a community that people love. I was interviewing your mayor in Grand Rapids, Rosalind Bliss, recently, and she was talking about, people got to fall in love with your community. And if you create a community, which you all have in Grand Rapids, it has lots of dynamics that make it interesting, exciting, attractive, welcoming, then, you're going to hook people, newcomers, but also you're going to keep the people that grew up there. You need, how do you driving innovation and in these emerging sectors, leaning into the future economy, which is all about smart, sustainable solutions. You've done that in Grand Rapids. Your business community led the charge to set goals for carbon use, water use, get people out of cars and onto buses. That's the kind of leadership and direction that we all need to appreciate is the future. Engaging with the world. You're the communities that are leaders in fighting the big fights for a cleaner planet and helping support reduction of climate change. That's where young people want to be. They want to be in communities that aren't protecting the past and the dirty old past. They want to solve the world's problems of social justice and climate change, and they want to be in communities where that's the community value set. So those are some of the big directionals, but also, you got to work with what you got. Every community is different. Every community has different assets and different problems, So that's why I really like to look at the communities that don't have one of the big drivers. Like you're not on a Great Lake, which is a location that makes Duluth and Marquette and Traverse City, and pretty soon Muskegon's going to be a thriving just mecca for people, professionals who want to live in a beautiful lifestyle community. Places that don't have a major research university, which is the fulcrum for economic dynamism today, that are like Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo. You all ran a strategic plan. Your civic and business and political leaders have for many years kind of come together and made a plan. And it's both the leadership and the plan based on what you've got to work with that is the most important, I think, ingredient, because every community has a different set of assets to build on and problems to solve.
Yeah, here in Grand Rapids, we became Beer City, USA. I suppose that didn't.
Yeah, and you added lots of different notes, from Art Prize signaling that this is a place not for crusty old conservative Republicans. It's a place for the green hairs and the creatives as well.
That's great. Here's a question from a viewer, John. Does the Midwest have the workforce right now with the requisite skills and knowledge to keep growing these emerging economic sectors here? Because if we can't make additional learning attractive to current Midwesterners, won't they grow more alienated if the money and the people from the coasts fill that need?
Well, it has for some time, based on kind of the unique development storyline, been a tale of two worlds here. On one side, we disproportionately produce talent, educate people, and often though those young people fled or left us and took their talents elsewhere, but we produce a lot of them. That actually has reversed in the Midwest for the first time in 50 years in the last decade. We now are keeping and attracting in more of our talent than leave us, which is a good sign. That means people are wanting to be here to do their thing. But we also, given the legacy of the economy that we created, has to have more of these folks out there who didn't need and don't have a post-secondary technical or other credential. And so we've got to do those two things simultaneously. One is keep educating and training to high levels all of our people and creating conditions that welcomes people in with those skills. And we got to reach and guarantee for those folks who are already out there that don't have a post-secondary credential, we're going to deliver that for you. And then you can, and so you can get a good job, which do exist for people with the right training. You just have to make it happen.
Hey, Randy from KDL has a question. Go ahead, Randy.
There, can you hear me now?
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really appreciate the information that you shared, John. There's a lot of great things going on here in the community. But one of the things that we see in the library and in the community is that there are really long lines at food pantries, and we look at school academic performance. And even before the pandemic, there were some serious areas of concern there, and they seem to be rooted in like household income. The households with lower income that are challenged at earning a good living wage are the ones that have more trouble with transportation, healthcare, food security. And I'm just curious about what your thoughts are on where's the right place to apply effort. Is it like policy, or is it like developing a social conscience in the businesses that are creating the job opportunities? I mean, where do we cast our focus to help people earn a better living wage?
I think, again, kind of both sides to the middle, meaning the dirty little secret about kind of Michigan's pre-COVID decent economy was that, as you note, it really wasn't producing that many good paying jobs that could support a family. We have more people, I think 43% that are, sort of living at that Alice level, which doesn't really support it because still are way too reliant. West Michigan's doing better, but overall is on one industry, the auto and related supply chains. So we got to focus on innovating and creating new jobs and businesses and leveraging our great assets in all of these growth sectors. The Michigan's not just the auto capital or the mobility capital, but it's the healthcare, it's the IP, it's the clean energy center of the universe, it's the clean water solutions, it's all of these things, which we can do. And you've actually done it a bit in Grand Rapids to show, you can run a plan to grow some new dynamics. But I think we have to work with the other side and appreciate, given our segregation, given differential opportunity levels of people of color or in neighborhoods of concentrated poverty with worse schools, disconnected by transportation from the good jobs and by training and skills. We always, even before the pandemic, needed to double our efforts to equip everyone, and particularly historically marginalized communities, with the education, the skills, and the ability to play into an economy that they were not able to access and not prepared for. And COVID made that like 5 times worse, because the low wage workers, the working poor, many of them essential workers, they were both the hardest hit by the pandemics and people of color. Health, kickouts and deaths, and they were the most likely to be hurt economically, either losing their job or, like in the case of Latino and African American mothers, have to go home and take care of kids that need to, no one else is going to take care of them, and lose it and have to give up their low wage job. So a lot of policies, and the Biden recovery plan has many of them: a child care tax credit, a child tax credit, things that could provide a floor, extending high-speed internet to every family, particularly those that can't afford, a computer. All these things have to be done in addition to, whatever the third sector and well-intentioned, communities with a conscience can do to support the basic needs of people. A tradition of ours, where we also got to kind of attack the root causes through some policy as well.
Thanks, John. Yeah, a question from a listener here. There's a lot of rhetoric from the Biden administration about this Build Back Better. That's their little slogan. In what sense do you think change and development happens through federal and state public policy, and what happens through local initiatives? Considering some of the proposals suggested by the Biden administration, which do you feel are helpful and which are less helpful in creating resilient and equitable communities?
I'm a big firm believer that in not only in the power of public policy, but also in the power of public-private partnerships can get a lot done working together, absent leadership from the feds or the state. But when the three can work and pull in the same direction, they're all important and can be very powerful. I think you all in Grand Rapids area and some of these other communities that I highlighted have done a lot on your own without a lot of help from the state or the feds, by some strategic and organized public-private leadership, particularly the private sector that really not only works together but runs an agenda, develops and runs an economic development agenda and a social, hopefully inclusive community building and resilient community building agenda. Now, there's no substitute. The feds can be famously helpful. Some of the main things that, are in what Biden's proposed that I think are the most powerful are, let's juice the kind of centers of research development and new technology, which has always been America's strong suit, so that we're the place that invents the new thing, whether it's the internet or every other industry, and we're the seizing those jobs, which China is competing for. Got to build the infrastructure, both connectivity for everybody, and to be able to play and participate and have a modern economy. We definitely could and should. Communities can do it on their own with like a free college guarantee or adult worker guarantee. But Tennessee, led by a Republican, has the Tennessee Reconnect program where the state guarantees higher education for both kids coming out of school and adult workers. And Governor Whitmer has proposed kind of a little piece of that in Michigan for Reconnect. So the feds could do more to support those types of things. But they've loaded into the recovery and the Build Back Better a lot of, I think, very important enablers of a more inclusive, participatory, reaching marginalized populations, like that child care tax credit and child credit, which would end half of children's poverty if we implemented it. And I think they're trying to take advantage of a moment just not dissimilar from after the Great Depression, when we can probably do some big things as a country, and some big things like Social Security and an unemployment insurance system was created after the Depression that did a lot of good, ended poverty among seniors. Now it's children who are in poverty. So, the state can do a lot to help. I can go on chapter and verse about what the state should be doing and a few good things that they are doing, but the state can be very helpful by naming and leading. But again, there's no substitute for local leadership that gets its act together, that has a vision, and you all have demonstrated that you can accomplish a heck of a lot, even if the feds in the state are absent from the field.
Yeah, thanks, John. Another question from a viewer. Are there Rust Belt allies ahead of us? I think meaning Michigan cities. Are there other parts of the in the region, in this so-called Rust Belt? Are they ahead of us in winning over the disenfranchised? Do they have experience we can use? Are there stories? I think you mentioned Pittsburgh early on in your conversation. Are there other communities that have done a few things that we can take some note of, and while we're different, learn a bit from their blueprint?
Yeah. And I think if the question is mostly about how do we build this inclusive community that, people of color, poor people, historically marginalized populations are full participants in, then yes, absolutely. And certainly prior to the pandemic, that's where a lot of the business civic leadership energy and certainly the philanthropic energy is in Detroit and in Cleveland and in Minneapolis, which many, it's awful that George Floyd and what's happening there has made that community appear to be, this rather racist police force problem center. Minneapolis-St. Paul had actually turned the economic corner by doing everything right, just as, Grand Rapids has done some things right, and was thriving economically, talent magnet, diverse. So they had begun to turn to, how do we build a more inclusive community? How do we set community goals and metrics? How do we make sure that we are moving the needle on both economic participation, on quality of life, on health, for all of them heretofore marginalized populations? And they were making plans and running plans and doing more of it than other communities, and other bigger city regions were trying to learn from them and model some of the practices and policies that Minneapolis-St. Paul was putting into place, where they have been, an innovator on sort of governance for some time, with the business leadership there being very forward-leaning. It's also the only place in the region where they figured out how to do revenue sharing across municipalities, so it's not a fight between townships and cities over who's going to land the next employer in the tax base, which goes a long way to fund and pay for an equitably built out and run community with infrastructure and schools that are good across political jurisdiction.
Yeah, it seems like there's a little addendum to that question in asking about cities overseas. Some of the work that you've done looking at global.
Yeah, so definitely, and I encourage. So we're hosting a May 11th, 12th International Transatlantic Symposium on this topic that I ended with. What can we learn from each other on how to accelerate economic development in kind of older industrial communities? And we already are producing and are going to come out of that producing lots of material and lift up examples of what they do in Germany, where they're very organized and they sort of manage the transition of the coal and steel region and do a lot of things that we could learn from. And other communities, they're flopping around, like the UK. Both the Johnson people, Boris Johnson, who benefited from the votes from these distressed older industrial communities, and the Labour Party, which found themselves, in distress because they didn't expect all these places of people to vote for Brexit. They're all jumping around like, how do we help evolve communities that are just like some of ours? So them in Grand Rapids and teach them a thing or two. That's what Mayor Bliss is speaking at, and Birgit Coles and some others are at this symposium. I could get you all some more information about that. There may be opportunity for a couple more people to participate, but there'll also be lots coming out of that I'd be happy to share. And I'd be happy to share things we're putting together that are illustrations right now, sort of background papers with all your group for sure. We'll be posting them online, and we want people to participate and take advantage of them.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, John. We'll want that information from you if people are interested, and we can post it in our website and the like. Question from a listener here. Is there such a thing as growing too fast or too suddenly and then leaving folks behind? For example, one of the big challenges many cities face is the rising cost of living, especially housing and education, while wages have remained stagnant. So how can cities create space for all levels of wage earners and not just those who are in the higher paying jobs?
Yeah, you're certainly seeing the most extreme cases of this in like the Bay Area of San Francisco, where it's $1 million for a starter home, like a really small one, and working folks, whether it's firefighters or teachers, just can't afford to live anywhere near certain communities. We're seeing some of that in Ann Arbor, where the price of real estate and housing is out the roof. It's almost coastal. Pricing people out of this town. Growth is good, but there's lots of things you can do to kind of manage it and so that it does work for everybody. The answer, as my buddies at Upjohn have found, is if your housing is overvalued, you've got to be willing to build more denser housing. Even market rate will take the overall price of housing down for poorer people because there's just more units available. So you got to be willing to let some more people live, and even by building some housing for them. And you can do lots of things to focus on the divide and stitch folks who are anxious about is this economy working not for me by, working on their neighborhood development, by working on those corridors, by aggressively doing education and job training and outreach so that those folks have the skills to take a job in a growth, economy. The most extreme case of this angst is in Detroit, where yes, it's good that a lot of hipsters are moving back into Detroit and there's more economic activity in the midtown and downtown. But you got a lot of people in the neighborhoods who they're not participating nor are they experiencing that is for them. And they go down to the base of Woodward, really transformed, but it's like shiny rich people and white people, and Shinola stores that aren't for them. So, Detroit leaders, the business leaders in particular, are like manic about how do we do better at a family of strategies that help stitch everybody in Detroit into this, growing again community. And there's a lot of hard work and a lot of focused, effort that business and public-private leadership need to make that real, not just talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, John. I was interested, you talked about a green and blue economy. I think we all understand a lot of the green economy. We've heard the Green New Deal, we've heard a lot about it, but I was a little bit fascinated by this blue, and I knew you weren't doing it just because you wanted to be half between Michigan State and Michigan.
Make everybody happy. That's my only goal. No, I mean, I was out sharing the results of this Brookings study we did 15 years ago, which was what's the economic benefit of if we follow through in Great Lakes restoration, if we clean up our harbors and AOC areas of concern like up in Muskegon, and what's the economic impact? And it's tremendous because you turn that argument of cleaning up the environment into an economic jobs in Michigan, Wisconsin. And that's how we got Obama and McCain when they were running for president to take a pledge to follow through on Great Lakes restoration. But it hit me like, just like there's a green economy that we're beginning to understand, there's a blue one with new water conserving technologies and products like Cascade Engineering makes this water filter plastic for the developing world that helps people not die from waterborne pathogens. There's all these water technology businesses and products to sell and make. There's water innovation and research. Your Annis Water Research Institute, is one example of the many centers of water research and education and training of the people who are going to manage water systems and find the new way to, fix remotely aging infrastructure, which we're doing. So you just have IT sensors and can go in and you don't have to rebuild the whole thing. I mean, that's like a ton of work that we can own. And when you clean up the mess from the industrial era and reconnect communities to water and waterfronts, they're magical places to live and work. And you've seen this in downtown Grand Rapids. You look out of your apartment or office building or you walk along the riverfront and, it's economic development. It makes it an attractive place and people want to live where they have this, they fall in love with the community and water is magic and water placemaking and reclaiming access and making your waterfronts available and accessible is a powerful economic engine. It's why Traverse City has grown and now professionals live up there all year round because of the lifestyle. It's why Marquette is growing with techies and business people, on a cleaned up, beautiful, historic slice of Lake Superior. It's just an amazing place to live, the outdoor lifestyle all year and it's just, historic town. So water, there's a blue economy that's, we've written, there's a ton of stuff out there. I've written about the power of the blue economy, just as the green economy create new jobs, new businesses, new economic development, particularly in our old water-facing, water-rich industrial heartland where we used and abused the water. We powered our heavy industry and we littered the waterfronts with a mess. When you clean it up, it's a magical piece of real estate that people will pay to be near and enjoy being near.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate some of those positive examples. I was thinking, we've actually gotten some bad press on the blue with Flint, with the Flint crisis. And
yeah, that's so ironic. And just as we're poised to be a leader with Michigan in particular, has more water, more lakes, more waterfronts, lakefronts, we get hit by, we can't even keep it, from killing people. We got to start, that's job one is water has to be available for all. And then, we can leverage it as an economic development and place asset.
Yeah, that's marvelous. About we're about out of time, John, and we could go on for quite a long time. We have more questions here too, but you mentioned the investment on the coasts, on the West Coast and on the East Coast, and not as much here in the Midwest. And I think in our work in the World Affairs Council, we notice that global folks too, they know the West Coast really well. They know the East Coast really well. They're just figuring out now that there's a great middle in the United States. And maybe, you were tying a number of these things to politics, and I was wondering about that, but you're right about it, that it's been the swing state issues and the fact that we're a player politically now. All of a sudden, these global, the embassies, the consulates, whatever, they're interested. Now, what is this Michigan? What are these people here? And all of a sudden, there's more dialogue. So are there more strategies with how we can promote the Midwest and get people thinking about investment here?
Yeah, from the earliest analysis we did for Brookings, it was in part, look, we are the swing states. People come through here every 4 years and promise to do something constructive. Let's lay out what would really be constructive, which would really help create new jobs and evolve our economy. And some of it is which we encourage and help make happen. Let's spend federal R&D dollars not on Cold War labs where they're finding new uses of petroleum, but let's do all the clean energy research we will win at our University of Michigan, Wisconsin, and solve the world's clean energy problems and create new jobs and businesses here. Let's fund Great Lakes restoration so that this 10,000-mile freshwater coast, which is as beautiful or more beautiful than the other coast, is a fulcrum for economic development and rebirth here. You're right, people don't know about that. I married into Michigan. I had been all over the world, but I was prepared to be underwhelmed 35 years ago when my wife-to-be took me on the grand tour. But you go up to Lake Michigan and Sleeping Bear Dunes, and then when you go up and hit the Lake Superior coast, like it keeps stepping up in grandeur and beauty. It's like, wow, this is amazing. And I'll probably close by saying we are an even more attractive coast than the East Coast or Gulf Coast or West Coast. One is even more. Those places have like earthquakes, fires, now hurricanes. We have friendly water. It doesn't even have sharks and things in it. You're not going to be bitten. You're not going to be blasted by a hurricane. And we also, those coasts, we have nice, friendly people too, not like the East Coast. So we have it all. Our freshwater coast is the most attractive coast.
Wow. So West Michigan nice has some advantages there too.
Indeed. But really, seriously, in this COVID reshaped era, the opportunity for quality of life and lifestyle affordable, where you do your thing in the world from anywhere, it really plays to our advantage. Every community on the Great Lake and many of the historic and quaint small town communities in Michigan and the Midwest are attractive places for professionals, and particularly when you want to have a sane life and raise a family. And they're now looking, and we had to have lots of assets of innovation and education here, so we have to leverage and build on all those. And again, I applaud West Michigan leaders and you all for doing a bit more of that more thoughtfully than some regions that haven't quite gotten their act together to figure out a path.
Sure. And we have the nation's best libraries too.
There we go.
John, this has been fantastic, and really appreciate you setting the table for a lot more conversation that I'm sure we'll be having. A great start to our series, our KDL series with community resilience. And how can people keep in touch with you and what you're doing? Are there certain places, certain websites, or certain places where they can keep checking in? Okay, what's John researching now? And
I think these days, everything I do, if you just follow me on Twitter at John_C_Austin or Facebook, you can find all the things that I'm putting out with Brookings, the Chicago Council, obviously those websites, my Michigan Economics Center. We publish and put out things around Michigan. So if you Google me and any combination of those words, you'll find what I consider to be exciting, good stuff. And I'm glad I didn't fall over from my COVID shot. I really appreciate the opportunity to share those things with you. And it looks like your logo is green and blue. That's why I came up with this green and blue economy.
There you go.
because of just for you guys. It's real.
Well, we appreciate it. Thanks for the branding. John, it's been great, and we will continue to provide you here in West Michigan with programming during these days of social distancing. Our three-part series on community resilience continues in partnership with the Kent District Library next Monday at April 19 at 6:30 on our YouTube channel. We're going to have a panel of community leaders, Tara Carnahan, Willie Patterson III, Carlos Sanchez. We're going to talk about empowering people equals community resilience. Join us there. And while you're at our YouTube channel right now, please subscribe to it and keep in touch with us at worldmichigan.org. Keep in touch with our library at kdl.org.